This is Beyond the Resume, the podcast that brings you the stories, advice, and insights behind some of the most successful people in real estate. Beyond the Resume is brought to you by Jackson Lucas Executive Search, the industry leader in human capital solutions. Here is Chris Papa and Lisa Flicker.
Tom, thanks for coming on the podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Have you been on any other podcasts?
Actually, my staff was joking with me because this is my third one this year. Yeah.
Out of a gun, I wonder. I thought I was the first. How are the other ones?
They were great. I enjoyed both. One was very local. A local newspaper does a podcast, and that was in-person kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
And,
what was the other one?
The other one was a group called Flower Hill Institute, which are in New Mexico.
Cool.
And they do farm worker housing with tribal entities. And they wanted to hear about our farm worker housing experience. So that's what that one was about.
Well, I'm going to look them up. I love learning stuff like that. So let's just get to the back of the baseball card. You're with Self-Help Enterprise. You're the president and CEO of Self-Help Enterprises. Can you tell us about self-help? Obviously, you working with farm workers. And anyway, so you're in the Central Valley of California, not too far from where Julio and I are located. But yeah, please give us an overview of the organization.
Yeah, Self-Help Enterprises we're private nonprofit. We've been around since 1965, and we were formed around actually a Quaker effort at the time to do farm worker housing through a new concept at that time known as mutual self-help housing, where we form groups of 10 to 12 families, get them financially qualified, and then they help one another build their own homes. And the way it works is that those 10 families all start their homes the same day, and nobody moves in until all 10 are done. And that model, that shared labor model, is different than Habitat and some other good efforts on sweat equity. But we pioneered that program back in 1965, and now there's about 100 organizations around the country who do that work.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You guys, is that still how it's done?
Oh, absolutely. Same stuff. We do about 100 homes a year through that program still, throughout the San Joaquin Valley, which, for those who don't know, are sort of Bakersfield to Stockton. That's the San Joaquin Valley.
And yeah, I mean, I ran across your organization because you're in the AHF top 50, I think, acquisitions, maybe.
Well, top 50 creation of new affordable housing units. So that would include both that mutual self-help housing program and also our affordable rental housing development. So between the two, we created, 500 units last year. And so that gets us on the top 50 list.
So you guys are doing the self-help build your own house program, and then you have the development program, like internal development, I guess, sort of. And then do you have an acquisition strategy too? We do
acquire rental properties. I wouldn't say it's core to our approach, but when there are opportunities in our service area for acquisitions that we can recapitalize or, make sense for us to take over as an affordable housing owner and sponsor, we will do it. And as a matter of fact, right now we're doing 4 acquisitions on USDA 515 properties, which are deeply affordable, but they are projects that would otherwise potentially go to market because they're past their deed restricted lives. And so we will do those kinds of acquisitions for sure, but we're also actively building new units, including in our rental housing program.
And the San Joaquin Valley, for those who don't know, what is the population there generally?
Yeah, so the population overall is, I believe, somewhere between 3 and 4 million people. The biggest cities are Bakersfield, Fresno, Modesto. We're located in Visalia, which is one of the larger cities, but it's also an area that's very much agriculturally based. It's the breadbasket of America. Much of the fruits vegetables, nuts are grown here. So we have a very large farm worker population, much of which is undocumented. And that's really our core service group, but not solely. We work only with low-income people, which we define as below 80% of area median income. And in our neck of the woods, that's about $70,000 for a family of four in a place like Fresno. So we do a lot of projects in rural, unincorporated areas, but we also work in the larger cities like Fresno, Modesto, and Bakersfield.
Most of the, yeah. So, I mean, on this podcast, we've interviewed a lot of affordable housing developers, and a lot of it's more urban. So I think the rural population doesn't get, I mean, I don't get represented on this podcast, but it's not like but it's a full thing. I know with the new tax credit incentives and stuff, it's focused more on the rural population. I guess like how, and I do actually some work with the undocumented kind of worker, and like it's just having, 15 people into a room and just insane, the living conditions there. So it's awesome that you guys are and driving, I live in the Bay Area, so I'll drive to LA and you drive through, I've been out to Bakersfield and stuff. Yeah, it's sparse, it's rural.
Yeah.
It's hot, as you told me earlier. How did you went to Colgate University? I don't think you're from the West Coast. How did you end up in
Visalia doing farm worker housing? Yeah, I was kind of looking for what I was going to do after graduation.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in northern New Jersey, just outside of New York City.
What town, Tom? Oh, Maya. All right.
Right on the border, yeah, of New York State. My parents both were born and raised in Suffern, New York.
Okay.
They're right over the border. And so, yeah, I had a great childhood there. My dad worked in New York City, and I went to Colgate University. I was a basketball recruit.
Nice.
Probably the only reason I got in.
Are you very tall?
I'm 6'6". Yeah.
Yeah, so, that's pretty tall.
Got some.
Now, if you stood next to me, it would be kind of a comedy show.
Right. So I, was looking at graduation and sort of what to do next, was thinking about grad school, had a lot of buddies headed for Wall Street, but I knew and sensed that really that wasn't going to be right for me. So I signed up to do VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, which was in those days the domestic Peace Corps. And you signed up for a year. I told them I wanted to do urban. Don't put me in some backwater place. And of course, the place they offered me was Visalia, California, and the San Joaquin Valley, doing essentially farm worker housing. And I thought long and hard, but I was digging post holes for fences that summer. And I was thinking, I got to get out of here and do something a little different. So, but came to Visalia, really fell in love with the work that Self-Help Enterprises was doing. That's who I was assigned to work with, and was just amazed by the population that they were working with, mostly Latino farm workers, and how committed they were to their families and improving their lives, and the willingness to work to do that and be involved in sort of the solution to their challenge. Just really struck me as an amazing thing. So fell in love with the work, and soon thereafter fell in love with a girl who became my wife, and who was a local. And
the beginning and end of every story.
Yeah. One thing led to another, and I've had now a 43-year career at Self-Help Enterprises.
Yeah, your whole career is at Self-Help.
Yeah, with one slight detour, I went to work for Ralph Nader back east after my year stint, and just worked in the PIRG, actually New York Public Interest Research Group, for a couple years, and then got recruited to come back to Self-Help Enterprises, who had gotten some new funding to do single family housing rehab, actually, and said, you got to come back and help us do this. So I said, yeah, I'll give you 2 years this time. And that's when I met my wife. So but yeah, I always say, I used to be embarrassed saying I've worked the same place for 43 years, but actually I'm not embarrassed by it, because it's been like an incredible ride. I've never had the same job for more than 6 months at a time. And nobody's ever told me, no, don't pursue that, and what a, and I'm working with great people who are committed and passionate about what we do. So what's not to like? I feel like I've had a varied career. I've been CEO for the last 12 years.
Do you hire out of Colgate often?
No, but I've tried to. They have like a January program where people, you could mentor somebody and I've signed us up a couple times, but we never get people coming west. That Colgate's very East Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they're
Lisa's in New York. Lisa's in New York. We know Colgate well. We've had a number of people on this podcast from Colgate, actually.
really, yeah.
Ty Barnes, Peter Scorpio. I actually talked to a guy yesterday who was from Colgate. He's like, we're small but mighty. There's a lot of real estate people from Colgate for some reason.
Interesting because my roommate for 3 years at Colgate is a guy named Steve Burke, who became the CEO of NBC Universal after a career at Disney and other places. He's now retired from that work. But so I, went to school with some mucky mucks for sure.
Yeah, like so Tom, like you, I mean, there's people listening to this podcast who like are probably interested in what you do. Like, wow, this guy is really seemingly helping a population that needs help, providing stable housing, building community there. At least the San Joaquin Valley is where most of produce in America is grown. I guess, how did you start there? Did you have any sort of skill set whatsoever besides digging posts?
None. I was a graduate. I majored in history and English.
Yeah.
So I had absolutely no skills other than I could communicate pretty well in a memo, and this was 1980. So it was all typewriters, but I really didn't know that would become a passion of mine, is helping create housing opportunities for people who otherwise may struggle to find them. I used to say another thing our organization's actively involved with is water, both water scarcity, water quality, groundwater degradation, due infrastructure, which is very much part of what we need to deal with in order to create new housing opportunities.
Right.
And 20 years ago, I remember saying to somebody, I ended up in housing and water as a career. Like, how does that sound boring or what? But now, like, the two top issues in California, at least, are housing and water, and nationally is housing and climate change, right? I mean, so it has become like top of people's list.
So if you want a career in politics, you're all set now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're sitting pretty.
What was the first role? Ditch digger, but then post digger, but then like when you started officially working there, did you like learn, I guess, like what was it? You said you like every 6 months or whatever, you kind of bounced around to different roles.
Yeah. So I started out as, I think we called them administrative analysts or something like that at the time. And so I was doing everything from grant writing to reporting, helping manage our housing programs and staff, which included construction staff and on-site construction staff at that time. And we had a pretty big leadership change about 3 years into my career. One of our folks, my boss, went off to be a CEO or executive director at another nonprofit. And I was kind of thrust into this position at age 28 of managing our whole mutual self-help housing program, which consisted of about 25 staff at that time, all older than I was, and many of whom had been doing work for a number of years.
But not taller.
Not taller, yeah. Although I did have a pretty big construction superintendent. He was a lot wider than I was, and he scared me. But so I was, as sort of a younger person, thrust in this whole world of trying to produce 120 houses a year in a service territory about the size of West Virginia. And so I was learning on the job and subsequently became sort of an expert in the self-help housing program. And part of that, my responsibility was our real estate development, because we had really taken on a role of being our own developer and subdivider to provide the lots we needed to build the single family homes that we were doing at that time. Learned how to deal with banks, commercial lenders, public lenders, learned the entitlement process in all these communities, to getting subdivision maps approved and entitlements, dealing with NIMBY battles. All that stuff was part of what I was doing. And then 10 years later, I was running a variety of our programs, which included also single family rehab, our water and sewer work, as well as real estate development and our self-help housing program. So just kind of progressed up to where I think by the early 2000s, I was named vice president, the only vice president in the organization, working closely with the CEO on a variety of corporate issues as well as the development work.
Was there ever a moment in all those years where you were like, I got to get out of here? Tell us the truth.
There were certainly moments, there's been a lot of hand-wringing in our world since November, right? Because people are like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? We're going to have funding cut. We're going to have this happen and everything else. And I was actually addressing a crowd of those folks like the week of that election. And I said, you know what? When I started in this work, Ronald Reagan got elected 2 months later. And at least partially on the notion that government does everything wrong and we need to reduce government. And all the people I was around said, we won't even last for 2 or 3 more years. I lived through the Gingrich contract with America. I lived through the Clinton reduction in how we do the welfare state, the Tea Party, there's all these things. The Obama administration, the first Obama administration, put zeros on some of our favorite programs when they sent budgets up to the hill. So yeah, we've been through this stuff before. The need's still here. We'll find a way. We always do. And, it's up to us to be resilient and keep our eyes on the prize.
What programs do you have? Like, do you have different services?
Yeah. So we, the major programs, we do housing counseling and home buyer education, and that's tied in to our single family housing development pretty closely. But in addition to doing the mutual self-help housing for our single family homes, we also have a pretty active infill development program where we use new markets tax credits. We use other forms of mortgage financing beyond USDA and work mostly with public partners to create infill single family home ownership opportunities, again, all for low income. Then we have our rental housing development. And of course, with that, we have asset management team. We have over 3,000 rental units at 65 sites. We have a resident services team that coordinates all that work. And then you go to the infrastructure side, and we're doing water and sewer development with local communities, often providing technical assistance to small rural agencies, sometimes public, sometimes not, who just need help putting projects together and leadership development and those kinds of things. And then lastly, we have become a first responder on drought related emergencies. So we are the ones you call if your well runs dry in the San Joaquin Valley, and we will get you a temporary water tank and pump water into your home so you can not be displaced, essentially. And then we will help you get a new well drilled or get connected to a nearby system. As you can imagine, during drought periods, that becomes a very prominent effort, and it's become a bigger effort than we ever intended for it to be, frankly. So we're doing that too, and today we have about 230 staff that are doing the range of those activities.
Yesterday I did some volunteer work at a Lightship project, and we saw a lot of the families that were living there. And I'm wondering, like, have you ever seen any of the families that moved into the homes that you've helped create? And does any of it like stick with you? I mean, I feel like that's got to be the best part of what you get to do.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty far removed, as you can imagine, these days from the day-to-day working with families, but I do get to go to the key ceremonies where people are moving into their homes. We just opened up a brand new rental project that it was already fully occupied, and I met families, and we always prominently feature one of the families as a speaker at those events. the stories are just incredible. I mean, it does two things for me. It just rejuvenates the why we do this stuff. But, it also just reminds you of the human spirit, and that when given the opportunity, people improve their lives, right? And they take advantage of those opportunities and are willing to work to do that. And the stories are heart-wrenching, but they're also uplifting.
Right. Yes, I live in San Carlos, and next door is Redwood City, which has a big migrant population.
Mhm.
And I do some work there. And anyways, I was told yesterday that a lot of people haven't show up for these different meals. There's like free meal services and stuff. And so, because of the political climate, ICE and all that, they're all kind of hiding out and stuff. I mean, is that affecting your real estate as a business? And then the people, obviously, I'm sure it affects them personally.
Yeah, as a business, it's a problem. Some of the housing that we build, the rental housing that we build, requires people to be documented in order to live there. But once the word goes out that that's a requirement, people these days are staying away. Even people who are documented, frankly, because they're just afraid. So we opened a project just last year nearby Visalia community called Farmersville, and we struggled to fill our farm worker units there. We had about half of the units were required for documented farm workers. They are full now, but it was one of the slower rent ups we've ever experienced, because usually we're rented up pretty much day one, because the need is just so great for affordable housing in general, let alone farm workers needing affordable housing. And, we have a 1% vacancy rate in our 3,000 unit portfolio. So we don't know how to act when we have an empty unit. We're like, what?
Right.
How is that
Start
possible?
marketing it. You got to market.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to actually market. What's going on here? Right. So yes, it's having an impact, and just the communities everyone that lives in the Valley either has a family member or extended family member or people that they know who are affected by some of these immigration enforcement activities, or the fear of those activities. I hear, talking to a superintendent of a local school recently, and he's saying, kids are not showing up to school even, because people are fearful of what may happen. I don't think you can understate the kind of trauma in some of the communities that we work in. It's pervasive, and this sounds silly, but flea markets are a big thing in the Valley. There's nobody at the flea markets. I mean, including vendors are stopping showing up because there's no traffic. I mean, it is just, and we experienced this the last administration of this current variety, but this feels more, it just feels like they're more competent now at creating this fear. And so I don't know, something's got to give at some point, because agribusiness in the San Joaquin Valley, and really it has not been targeted yet.
Well, because they're so essential, right? We need food.
And yeah, and they're the $1 million a plate folks that when they come to raise money, I mean, everybody knows who's doing the work here, the farmer. It's not documented people, or relatively small percentages. So it's interesting to me, but our communities are just, I would call, just general trauma is what has settled in this region.
Are there programs where people that have been set up at all, where people are trying to help with the overarching feeling? I mean, I'm here in New York. We have some of this, but I know it's nothing like what you guys are facing out there.
Yeah, there are some good organizations. There's a lot of folks that are doing the know your rights stuff. We're doing that. We're doing that both for our staff, because we have staff that work in these communities, and these indiscriminate, what's going on in LA is pretty terrifying, right? Indiscriminate, we pick you up because you're brown, right? It's not necessarily targeted. So yeah, we're tied into that. We're tied into the whole notion of knowing what to do if X happens, and there are some groups out there that are doing some good work around this, but it's also so widespread that it's very hard to, in terms of our population is so widespread that it's also kind of difficult. But all of our outreach efforts include, if you need to talk to somebody, here are some resources. If you need to talk to a lawyer, or if you want to go to a workshop on what to do when X happens, here's what you do.
What's the growth trajectory now?
The population growth.
Well, I mean, as an organization.
Oh, as an organization, I feel like we are pretty well staffed up at this point for the foreseeable future. Our real estate team is about 20 people right now. If you look at all the folks that we have working at developing new projects, when you go to our construction staff and those kinds of things, that's in addition to that. But, 20 people full-time doing real estate development, doing the financial part and just shepherding projects from start to completion, we're pretty well staffed up. I don't see us having to grow past that. And frankly, some of the funding streams that we've relied upon pretty heavily in the last 7 years or so are pretty sparse pickings at the moment. So while we'll see some increases in like the low-income housing tax credit program after the tax bill was passed, that will help. But some of the subsidy sources we've relied on at the state, we kind of ran out of some bond money. So a lot of us in California are pushing for a new housing bond for the 2026 ballot in November, which will be pretty important for us going forward.
Gotcha. Well, let's say that financing doesn't come in, because I work with some nonprofit housing and stuff, like I was on the board and stuff, trying to always figure out we're trying to raise more money. We got to raise more money. Money's always money's a big issue.
Right.
And are there any new initiatives or any creative ways that you're trying to come up with different financing strategies?
It's interesting. We're pretty conservative financially, always have been, and have never been an organization that just chased every new opportunity. We've always tested ourselves before we do something new. Like, can we add value? Is there something in it that we bring to the table? And when we started doing rental housing development in earnest, that wasn't until the mid 1990s. We were pretty much all single family ownership programs prior to that. And we always treated developer fees and some of the resources that can come through as capital, and not as we rely on it for staffing and overhead costs. So doing it that way, we've both built up some fairly significant resources, unrestricted resources, and we've enabled ourselves to really compete in the real estate market and be nimble and be able to, property becomes available. We don't have to wait for 6 months to see if we can get a grant or a loan from somebody to buy it. We can jump on it if it's the right thing for us to do. In terms of, and we expand and contract if we need to. If funding runs dry in one of our programs or one of our project areas, we typically know that's happening, and we either work to fill it with new resources, or we do a reduction in force if we have to. And during the recession, we had a, reduction in force of maybe 10%, in 2011. And, some programs come and go, and we just, deal with it. And so, no, we just adopted our annual budget, our board of about $29 million, our staffing and overhead operations budget, essentially. And we feel confident that we're going to get through the year because we have most of that funding is already secured. Next year may look different, but it also may look better in some areas, and some areas we've got to deal with it. Yeah. So we've been conservative. It's served us well. Most lenders love lending to us and funders because we're We're solid financially, and that's been important. But we don't throw money away either, and we don't continue to do programs that are not paying for themselves over time. We make those hard decisions when we need to.
Well, Tom, July in the San Joaquin Valley must be extremely hot. But you ain't seen nothing yet, because you've just sat down on the hot seat.
I think you can handle it, though. We'll start you out easy.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book or podcast that you'd recommend?
What's on my reading table right now is Abundance, which is by Ezra Klein and an associate.
How is it? I mean, I've heard him on the podcast talking about and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I don't agree with all of their takes on things. They slam California pretty good, much of which is deserved, but some of which is a little bit overblown with how we've created scenarios with barriers to development. But overall, I find it to be an intriguing look at how progressives need to alter the way they look at the world and be honest with themselves about certain things. So I've enjoyed Abundance.
Yeah, I've loved the sound bites he's done. So you've been there for a long time, started digging fence posts. What has been your most memorable deal since you arrived at self-help?
I'd say that's, it's called the Lofts at Fort Visalia. It's a downtown project on a historic site in the city of Visalia. It was the site of the first non-native structure that was a fort in about 1852. We had been working to get that site from the city for about 10 years. We were able to eventually cut a deal. We developed 81 units of affordable housing, 50% of which is permanent supportive housing for people who were formerly homeless. And we created really a commercial, pretty dense for us, 53 units to the acre. And we created something that feels like a commercial front because we were displacing an arts program, a nonprofit arts program. We were able to create a permanent space for their programs. So they're essentially an on-site service provider. So we created lofts for artists in the buildings itself that face the street. It's kind of an arts district area of the city. And we work with local historians to create a mini museum for the site as a historic site. And it's got great architecture. We opened it about a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago at the most. And a lot of people doubted what we could do with a downtown development of that sort, but we're very proud of it.
Read a little bit about that project. They took half of the units and they gave them to unhoused residents, and you brought in a bunch of different mental health workers. It made it all the way here to the East Coast, so it's phenomenal. Great.
Oh, beautiful. Work. Yeah, so real proud of that one.
I feel like it takes special person to be mission driven in their career. And what I often see is people who are very focused at work and then they give charitably, but your whole career has also been kind of a mission driven. When you hire people, how do you find people that are like-minded? Are there questions that you ask? Like, how do you know someone's not going to come in and mess up the culture?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And because we do ask some mission oriented questions. And one of the things I say to people, even when they're in the application phase, is, if you don't drink the Kool-Aid here and actually believe in the mission, you won't be here. I mean, just one way or the other, it won't be right for you. And we find that out pretty quick when people are not, if they don't, embrace that mission, because some things just won't make sense to them. Right. Because we do make some decisions that we do it because it's the right thing to do, but it's going to cost us a little money or, whatever. I'm not saying we do that regularly, but a lot of times we make business decisions that a typical for-profit developer would not make. I had an old banker relationship, old-time banker, kind of guy who would come out to a site, kick the dirt, it looks like a duck and, whatever. And he told me, I saw him, we did a first deal with him in the late 1980s. And I saw him some years later. And he said, when I started working with nonprofits doing this housing stuff, I didn't understand them. I just didn't get those guys like you. Like, what the heck was in it for you? Well, like, why the heck will you do this? And then I finally realized, he said, that the difference is you guys never walk away from anything that needs to be done. Where the developers I work with forever, like, they hit a snag. They're like, I'm not hanging around for this. And so we have these projects that we've had for 10 years and we're still waiting for entitlements or to get sewer or something. And we stick with them because it's needed in the community and it's what we believe. But that's a good example of somebody just saying, I just don't get it. So it is different.
We got to start asking that quite, have people drink the Kool-Aid, Lisa. Some do, some don't. That's your requirement though.
I like it. Same.
Now your company's self-help, but I know it doesn't mean you're self-help here. People are building their own property. So it's that's a fascinating program. What mentors, you mentioned Ralph Nader during this, like what mentors throughout your career have been, or your life have you want to give credit to?
Yeah, I would say my two predecessors at Self-Help Enterprises who ran the organization were really instrumental in how I look at the world, how I look at this work, how to treat people with dignity and respect, and also not burn bridges. It's essential not to burn bridges, especially doing something like real estate. And they taught me, the guy's name was Bob Marshall, who was essentially our first executive director, who was here when I first arrived. He was a Quaker. He was just mission driven from start to finish. And then the guy I worked for, who was really a mentor, was Peter Carey, who succeeded Bob. But, I think one of the things that I really learned from them that was essential is that really our two biggest assets as an organization are, first, our staff, is our biggest asset. But 1A is our reputation. And it takes years and years to build trust in communities and a positive reputation. And it can be lost so quickly. And so I do spend time with new staff describing to them that you are part of a legacy of trust in communities. And that is sacred to us, our reputation. And every day that you're working out in communities or with elected officials or with families that we're trying to serve, you are representing the organization and that legacy. And if you screw it up, you will be out of here so fast, because you can lose that so quickly. And I never want to go back to a community 10 years after we built a project and have somebody say, well, that last one was horrible, so we're not letting you do this without a fight this time. And I think we've done pretty well on that. That's cool.
Yeah. Reputations take forever to build up and 1 second to tear down.
Yep.
Unfortunately. Well, Tom, thank you for all the work you're doing. Thanks for coming on the podcast. It's great to get to know you better. And New Jersey does produce the best people. It's proven here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Resume, a Jackson Lucas podcast where we take a deep dive into the career journeys of some of the top minds in real estate and equip you with the knowledge to move forward in your path towards the success you've envisioned. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond the Resume. We're grateful for your support. All episodes of Beyond the Resume are brought to you by Jackson Lucas, building inclusive and diverse businesses through talent acquisition. Visit us at jacksonlucas.com.